Hey guys, so welcome to the Ultimate Guide to Maths Word Problems Intermediate Part 1. Here we take off from where we left off in the two beginner versions. My name is Addy, and you might know me from one of my other courses. I'm a maths tutor with nearly 10 years of experience teaching maths to a wide variety of students. As you'll see, I have a really easygoing teaching style, which helps me connect with my students and allows me to convey my knowledge really easily. Now in this course, we're going to cover 10 different topics that are typically covered at the grade 9, grade 10 level. And I will systematically take you through some steps and a methodology behind approaching problem-solving questions, which seem to be a problem for a lot of students. The questions that we'll be covering in this particular course are fairly challenging. So guys, if word problems is something that you're not comfortable with yet, then I suggest and encourage you to go through my beginner versions first and really get used to the methodology behind some of the working out here, because I will be assuming a lot of the knowledge that we'll be covering in these particular topics. So guys, let's straight get into the curriculum. First up, we're going to have a look at indices. So a typical question that we're going to come across would be, at the beach there are 5.3 times 10 to the power of 10 grains of sand, out of which 0.3% are washed out to sea each hour. How many grains of sand are washed out to sea each day? So guys, again, this is a very typical sort of question at this level. It requires you to gather knowledge from several different topics in order to be able to answer a single question. So as you can see, we have indices here, we also have percentages here, and we also have a little bit of multiplication that we need to do in order to solve this type of question. Then we move on to algebra. So at an internet cafe, Bella uses the computer for J hours in a 24-hour period, while her sister Celia uses it for 1/7 of the remaining time. For how long does Celia use the computer? And then what is the total number of hours they both use the computer? So again, very typical sort of questions when it comes to algebra at this kind of a level. And we'll build on these. We'll be doing a number of these types of questions and build on them as the lecture goes along. Then we move on to linear equations, which marry up really well with our algebra chapter. So a question could be, Hertz car rental charges $50 per day plus $1.20 per kilometer to rent a car. Aviva car rental, on the other hand, charges $40 per day plus $1.35 per kilometer. Now, Ben wants to rent a car for 3 days. How far can he travel so that the cost from either company will be the same? So very typical linear equation type of question, guys. We need to take the information we've been given, construct a couple of equations, and then use our knowledge of algebra and linear equations to solve them in order to find the answer. Then we're going to move on to geometry. So again, it's a new chapter that I'm introducing in this particular course. Because it's quite relevant, and it does become quite a bit of a there's quite a bit of a pattern when it comes to geometry. So a question could be, a long piece of ribbon pegged at one end is tied to the top of a pole. It just touches Gary's head, who is 5 meters away from the point where the ribbon is held to the ground. Now if Gary is 1.5 meters tall, what is the height of the pole? Now you might have already picked this up, guys, but this is us using our knowledge of similar triangles to answer this question. Now, when it comes to questions like these, guys, it is absolutely imperative that we draw out the question or the information that's been given to us. Once we draw it out accurately, the calculation behind it is actually not that difficult. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Then we'll move on to trigonometry again, which will marry up really nicely with what we cover in geometry. The north and south buildings are 100 meter high and 71 meters high, respectively. From the top of the north building, the angle of depression to the top of the south building is 20 degrees. How far from each other are the two buildings? Again, guys, very, very common type of question. Sounds challenging, but once you've drawn it out and once you become accustomed to angles of elevation, angles of depression, these kind of questions become a piece of cake, and I will show you exactly what I mean in the lectures. Then we move on to ratios and proportions. So the question could be, the authors of a book are going to share the royalties in proportion to the number of chapters they have written each. Charlie wrote 4 chapters, Brad wrote 3, and Nigel wrote 5. If they need to share $24,000, how much will they each get? So again, a very typical sort of question when it comes to ratios. It just takes a dollar amount, typically, and splits it into a particular ratio. So this one is a little bit more challenging than the ones we covered in beginner part 2 version. However, I will show you some neat tricks in order to be able to tackle them. We'll then move into finance and measurement. So in finance, a question could be, Myra increased her profit margins on clothes 200%. While Nicole increased her profit margins to 50%. They now both have the same price on clothes. Now, if Myra's original cost was $120 for clothes, then what was Nicole's original cost? Fairly straightforward. The question might sound complicated, but the methodology behind it is actually quite straightforward, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Measurement. A chessboard is made up of 8 rows and 8 columns of squares. Each little square is 42 centimeters squared. What is the distance from the upper right to the lower left corner of the chessboard? Now guys, this particular question I've seen it a number of times, and it seems to really bamboozle students. So I decided to put it into this particular course because I think it is, it's not a difficult question, but it does involve a little bit of thinking, and I'll show you exactly how to approach it. Then we'll move into probability. Again, we're going to be looking at a lot of Venn diagram type of questions because they become really prevalent at this level. So a question could be, a class has 38 students who are doing different types of sports: cricket, basketball, and football. 8 students are doing all 3. Now 12 of the students are doing cricket and basketball, 15 students are doing cricket and football, and 10 students are doing basketball and football. Also, 24 students are doing cricket, 20 are doing basketball, and 20 are doing football. 3 students aren't doing any of them. Part A, draw a Venn diagram. Part B, use the Venn diagram to answer a bunch of probability questions. So as you can see, guys, this question is definitely a lot more involved than the Venn diagram questions that we covered in beginner part 2 probability version. I can assure you by this level, you need to be really across Venn diagrams and how they work, as well as tree diagrams for that matter, because a lot of the questions will be relying heavily on your knowledge of those things. Then we'll move to quadratic equations. So this is where we finish up. So Raiden throws a piece of paper out of the window of his apartment. The paper is h meters above the ground and u meters from the building. Now the path of the paper is described by h equals negative u squared plus 4u plus 21. How far from the apartment will the paper land? Again, guys, a very typical sort of question at this level when it comes to quadratic equations. This is where quadratic equations really gets introduced to you guys, and then they take it to a whole other level once you get to grade 10 and above. So guys, again, very typical sort of questions that we'll be covering across these 10 odd topics. I've attached worksheets at the end of each lecture as well to give you more opportunities to practice. And remember, guys, this course is completely free. So make sure you take it, make sure you go through it diligently, and if you feel like you need to step it up a bit in terms of your challenge once you've done this course really well and you're happy with your progress, I suggest that you enroll in my intermediate part 2 version, which will give you the next set of challenges. So thank you guys, and I will see you in the very first lecture, which is Indices.